All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I was trying to think of the best way to go through and start to get into the concept of Flexbox. This is what I came up with. So what I'm going to do with you right now is to go through this, which is the W3 School CSS Flexbox tutorial. All right, then I would suggest if you get some time, at a minimum, go through this. This is a thing by Kyle Cook. Kyle's got the website Web Dev Simplified. The guy, in his own way, is a genius. And he's got this Learn Flexbox in 15 minutes video that's very good. He just literally sets up a simple example and keeps going through different things in it. I think it's very good. I found this, the Ultimate CSS Flex Cheat Sheet. It's an article by Freed Code Camp that looked pretty good. Tonight I'm going to go rewatch this, plus I'm going to watch this. This is Brad Traversy's Flexbox Crash Course 2022. If you still haven't had your fill after that, you can go and sign up for a free class out with Udemy. But, like I said, this is the W3 Schools CSS Flexbox. Now, this is Chapter 9, so I'm going to go over this, then Chapter 9 in the book. That'll be it for today. But tomorrow, even though you're not going to be tested on it, you're not going to have any homework on it, I still think I might go over CSS Grid. Because whereas Flexbox is a terrific tool, it's one-dimensional. Grid is two-dimensional. And it allows you to do things you can't do with Flexbox. You can use the two separately, or you can use them together, or as we've done so far, not at all. All right, so we're going to go through this section, and as it says, before Flexbox, there were 4 basic layout modes. You can read them here, but the big thing is, when you use flexible box layout, which is typically referred to as Flexbox, you don't need floats. That's the biggest thing. And I've talked to so many developers who just think floats, pardon my French, suck. They just don't like them. Flexbox is supported by all of the major browsers. All right. When you start to work with Flexbox, you must define what's called a Flex container. Flex container contains Flex items. So for instance, here's a Flex container. All right, and here's some items. So when we look at this, now I'm going to go through these examples here, but I'm going to kind of do them quickly. All right, so a Flex layout must have a parent with a display property set to Flex. So there it is. If I get rid of this line right here, if I get rid of that line, and we run this again, it doesn't look like much. It's just 3 divs that take up all the space they can. But when I come back and put that back in again, now you can start to see these are Flex items that are inside of a Flex container. There's the items right there. So notice class is Flex container, and there's the items. Now we could add more if we wanted to. All right, so we could make 4, 5, and 6 in here. And we could even make more than that. I'm not going to, but we could. All right, so you can go and play with this stuff all you want to. All right. So I'm just going to keep bopping back and forth here. All right. So the parent element, again, is the Flex container. The thing inside are the Flex items. Okay, so you say for Flex container, display Flex. All right, pretty much what we just did right there. So we said display Flex up here for Flex container. Then we define the container down here. But the display Flex means that these are all Flex items. All right. Now, these are the different properties that you can work on with this. So let's take a quick look at these. There's Flex Direction, Flex Wrap, Flex Flow, Justify Content, Align Items, and Align Content. So let's take a look at all of them. Flex Direction, right now, this direction right here is column. Everything is in one column. So the stuff stacks vertically. Okay, so again, if I come back here, just like we did before, and I make 6 of these and I run, they're all there. All right, I didn't renumber them. The opposite, as you'd probably guess, the opposite of column, all right, is row. So you can see the difference. All right, and again, I'll get rid of those extra ones that I added. So if you want things to stack and you want them to stack horizontally like this, you choose for the flex column, the flex direction, you choose column. If you want it to go in the other direction, so that's row right there. But if I put in column, oh, it's not where I want to put it. I want to put it right there in the flex direction. So notice how it changed. Okay, so that's the first thing. So flex direction, row if you want it to go across horizontally, all right, and column if you want it to stack vertically. There's a reverse. All right, so column reverse. What does that mean? Well, notice instead of 1, 2, 3, which is the order we had them, it's now 3, 2, 1. Now, you might think, well, big deal. It's a very big deal. And it's a very big deal because what you can do is this means that you don't have to, like you typically did with floats, you can put your things on the web page in any order and then just move them around by using the flex direction, or the order property rather. All right. There's reverse, and as you'll see in a couple minutes, there's order as well. There's a wrap property. It specifies whether items should wrap or not wrap, and I think it's turned off by default. So here we've got the example. So let's do this. Let's bring this up. All right, and where it's got flex wrap, I'm going to change this to none. Just like that. Now I'm going to run it. Now notice what happens here. All right. It gets to a point you just can't see them anymore. See, they're there, but you can't see them in your area. All right. So for you to be able to see all 12, you have to make this pretty wide. But on the other side, if I make that wrap and I run it, then notice what happens. All right. So here that's wide enough for 3, 4, 5, etc. All right. So typically it's either going to be flex wrap or flex wrap none. So that's no wrap. I thought it was none, but I guess it is no wrap. Okay. None appeared to work as well. You can also wrap in reverse like we just looked at. There is a flex flow property, and as it says right here, the flex flow property is a shortcut. I want to say that again. The flex flow property is a shortcut. All right. So what you can do, the flow property is a shortcut for direction and wrap. All right. So right here, you're saying both. I want to do it row and I want it to wrap. So flex flow is just one line as opposed to saying flex direction row, then on the next line, flex wrap, wrap. All right, so it's just a shortcut. Justifying content, as it says, to align flex items, and there's different ways that you can justify content. All right. And I'm not sure if I'm going to put the right thing down, but I'm going to try it anyway. So justify content center. All right, so you can see that if I do this, they stay centered. I think I can say start here, but I could be wrong. A bunch of these are real close to one another. All right, so if I do that, let's see. It's on the left end. See that? And if I do end, it should basically do the same thing, but on the right-hand side. All right, so that's how you can justify content. That's the start and the end that I just showed you, okay? All right, then there's a bunch more. Notice there's a space around. What does that mean? Again, it's easiest to take a look at it. You'll notice that it has pretty much an even space between each one and then a little bit left on the end. All right, if you don't like that one, there's a space between. Notice the difference with that one. Now, there's almost nothing here. All right, so it's all a spatial kind of thing. It's what space you want, how you want the space set up, etc. The align items is kind of what I showed you already. There's an align item center, align items flex start, which will left justify them, and align items right flex end, which will do it on the other end. There's a stretch. All right, it stretches them to fill the container. Notice as it says, it's the default. So when we do this, if I keep making this smaller and smaller, you can see how eventually, if I make it that small, but even like here, which would be really small, they're each the same, there's the same distance, and they're each the same size. There's a baseline property here, so if you kind of want to center things, an align content property, as mentioned right there. You can align them again with space between. Kind of looked at that before, space around, stretch. All right, there's just so many different examples in here. This one is cool. I think this is one of the coolest parts about this. Perfect centering. It says in the following example, we will solve a very common style problem, centering something perfectly. Now, you may not think that is perfectly centered, but again, please look at it. It is. And as I make this thing bigger or smaller, it stays perfectly centered. All right, see that? So even as I maneuver around with this, it still stays centered. That is a very hard thing to do with just CSS because that should remain centered regardless of the medium you're using. So that's the first one. All right, let's go on to the next one. These are flex items. All right, by no means are you expected to memorize this stuff. But the idea is if you can start to develop a little bit of a comfort level with it, all right, you'll be pretty well off. As it says, the direct child elements automatically become flexible because they're flex items. We already talked about that. Here's some things that you can do with flex items. Order. Now, the difference between order and reverse that we saw before is if I have things in there in order 1, 2, 3, 4, and I reverse them, it goes 4, 3, 2, 1. But if I've got them with ordered and I've got them 1, 2, 3, 4, I can now make it 4, 1, 2, 3 or something like that if I want. And that's the example they're going to show here. All right. I guess I even used the right numbers. So notice they're in here as 1, 2, 3, 4. But we're saying in our container, we want the order to be, we want number 1 to go third, number 2 to be second, number 3 to be fourth, and number 4 to be first. So 4, 2, 4, 2, 1, 3, as we count them in order. All right, there's a grow property. Now, why is this important? Well, imagine that these, let's pretend for a second that where we've got these, in fact, I probably could move them around. Let's do this. Let's move this one. Oh, I thought it would let us move it. I guess it won't. All right, we'll do it on the try it yourself. There we go. I'm going to grab this one. And I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to move it over here. So what did I do? I changed it like this. So imagine this was an aside, and this was an aside, and this was main content. Now what you're telling it here is, I want this main content to grow as it starts to grow 8 times what the other ones do. So as you change it on a machine, now it doesn't have to be 8. We could have that and make it 4. And you can see it goes down, but now it's 4 times the amount. All right. We could just even double it if that's what we want to do. Whoops. Right there. That would be a 2. All right. So now it's just twice as big. But there's a lot of different usages for this. All right. And again, remember that one of the things we're talking about doing in here is we're talking about the ability to not use floats. All right. And just like you can grow things, you can say you want one or more to shrink. All right. The flex basis, as it says, it specifies the initial length of a flex item. So if we look here, what we're saying is just this one, number 3, should be 200 pixels to start. All right. So when you look at that, and again, let's look at the example. All right, you can see that it is twice as big as the other ones, pretty much no matter what you do with it. Flex property, as it says, it's another shorthand. So you can combine flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis into one thing by using just the flex property right here. It's kind of like when you set up a border. You know, we've done things like border, and then we'll say, for example, 3 pixels, solid black. Well, you can do border and break it down and just say border color, and then say border style, etc., and border size or whatever. But we use border because it's a shortcut, and that's exactly what this is. All right. The align self property, as it says, specifies the alignment for a selected item inside of a flexible container. Notice it overrides the default. In these examples, we're using 200 pixel high container. All right, but you notice that that one is not 200 pixels. But you'll notice it basically stays where it is. So these are the ones we just looked at. What I like so much about doing it this way is in our textbook, they tend to show a couple of examples, but not a lot of examples. Here, you can go back and look at any one of these you've got a desire to look at. All right, so finally to finish, this is the responsive. So as it says, we learned about media queries earlier, but you can use media queries along with Flexbox. It's not that Flexbox totally removes the need or the necessity for media queries, but it can help. So what are we saying here? We're saying naturally we want to display flex with a row. So we want it to go and stack horizontally. However, when you get, when you've got a max width, so 1 to 7 to 800 pixels, now we want it column. So again, you can see this, that once we reach a certain point, boom, it goes to row. Once we reach another point, it goes down to column. All right, very similar to what we just looked at in the example, all right, that I gave you with the Stellos thing. So they end this with a couple of examples. There's a responsive image gallery in here. You notice the pictures are of different sizes. All right, and as you take this and we try it and we bring it in here and run it, all right, you can see they're all occupying the same amount of width. And even as we change our screen size, that stays true. All right, we're not talking about the size of the picture. We're talking about the size or where it's being placed or whatever you want to say. Then there's this responsive website. All right, this looks very similar to the type of stuff we've been doing. All right. Now, when we look at this and we make this smaller, it'll look good, except the headings really aren't set up very well. Well, I didn't do it to try it yourself. I don't think the headings were set up well in here. These don't look bad. This doesn't look bad at all. But notice as I start really making it a lot smaller, all right, it still doesn't look bad. And that probably, you wouldn't make it much smaller than that, even if it was on a phone. All right, but on here, you can make it really, really, really small. So then it starts looking goofy. All right, but you wouldn't probably have anything. This would probably be more about the width. You'd have it anyway for a for a phone. Okay, this is something that you might want to think about when you are going to where you're building your electronic portfolio at the end of the semester, and you want it to be responsive, and you want to use Flexbox, for example. You might want to look at this last example. It's very well done. All right, so with all that, okay, oops, I removed the wrong one. Like I said, possibly tomorrow we will go in and we will look at grid. All right, so that would be, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say W3 schools, CSS grid. Now, some people love grid. Some people find it really hard to work with. But if you look in here, notice what we're doing. You can really take with a grid layout, lay out things any way you want. I think I'd like to go through this tomorrow. It'd probably take, again, about 15 or 20 minutes. All right, so with that said, let me jump into the book. Sorry if you hear any background noise. I'm running out of room on this computer, so I went out. That's why I'm lecturing later. I went out to Walmart, bought myself an external drive, and I'm moving some of my stuff over to an external drive now. So I've got room on this one. It actually didn't even want to let me earlier save my earlier lecture. All right, it said I was out of room. So, all right. So again, we will go through this now, and then that'll be it for the day. Now, I've already been going for somewhere around 2 hours or so between these two lectures. This one is now up to 22 minutes, and I think the other one was about an hour and a half, something like that. When I lectured this morning, when it didn't work, all right, we spent around 3 hours on it, but I gave, I think, 3 breaks during that or something like that. So you're getting the same information. Am I talking faster? It's possible. I'm not trying to. So let's go back to here. We'll go to our book here, and we're going to jump into, this is the end of it, but we're going to jump into chapter 8. Let's do this. All right. We're now done with section 1, period. We're done with it. All right. We're going to go over section 2, chapter 9 right now. You will be responsible by next Sunday, the 24th, to do the written tests, to do the homework, and to do the labs for chapter 8 and for chapter 9. I would like to go over chapter 10, and like I said, I may do that even tomorrow. But you will not be responsible for anything in chapter 10. No homework, no written tests, no labs. So, geez, Mr. Scott, then why are you going over it? Because at least you've been exposed to grid layout then. And I think that's a good idea. All right, and that means that next week we'll be able to get into this. And then the following week we'll get into we'll hit Bootstrap hard for a week, etc. All right. So I'm going to jump down into chapter 9. It's not a real long chapter. It's about 25 pages. In this chapter, as the author says, you'll learn how to lay out pages using, I've never heard it called flexible box layout. It's always just called Flexbox. All right. So we get a quick intro to Flexbox, how to set Flexbox properties, and we end with a responsive web page that uses Flexbox. We can bring that one up and look at it in just a bit. All right. So, as it says, although you can get floats to work, they're kind of a pain in the butt. It can also be difficult to code media queries when you work with a lot of floats. You've already seen some of that. This is where Flexbox comes in, as the author says. It provides a more efficient way to lay out, align, and distribute space among container elements, especially as the size has to change for different screen sizes. So right now, what we're going to look at in just a second is figure 9.1. All right, and they talk about, they lay out what Flexbox is. Now, one thing, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to go here. I don't know if this will give me what I want or not. Looking for a better picture. This one might be good. All right, so we've got a main axis, which by default is going to be our x-axis or our horizontal axis. And we've got a cross axis that by default will be our y-axis or our vertical axis. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind as we start, because I figured, at least in my opinion, the picture that they showed here was a little confusing. It's very verbose. All right, it's saying the same thing I just did, but it gives you a bunch of terminology in here that, at least when we're first starting out, I think it can be confusing. Again, main axis, cross axis, flex items, all right, as it says, cross start, etc. Start and end type of thing. Start and end. All right, so again, x-axis, y-axis. A navigation menu with Flexbox. The nice thing about this is what you could easily do with that particular example is you could say when it gets to a certain width, this right now is flex direction row. All you'd have to say is flex direction column, and then it would stack. All right. So even though it's a little redundant, let's go over this. Flexbox is a CSS module you can use to develop page layouts for various sizes. Unlike the box model, it does not require floats. A Flexbox is a container, flex container. It contains one or more flex items. As it says, flex items are laid out within a flex container along a main axis. They can also be aligned via a cross axis. So again, main axis, cross axis. Width and height properties are used to set the dimensions. If the width is not set, the container defaults to 100% of the parent. So it's greedy, for lack of better words. Right here with your first Flexbox example. All right. Notice they have in here again, display. All right, so flex display, and then the direction. Now this is a very simple example. This is a nav bar, nothing new in there. But you're saying with the UL, display flex, flex direction, column. So you'll know that you get this. If you change that to flex direction row, you'd get it across, more the way we have been doing it. So to display an element as a flex container, you set the display property to flex or to flex inline. All right, some of these properties, we've looked at these, but again, they will show some examples in here. All right, when you justify content, notice how you can do it. Flex start, which moves it way over to the left. And as it says, that's the default. Flex end, which moves it way over to the right. Center, which does try to center a line. Space between. Space around. And space evenly. They do show most of these in here. So again, there's space between. So notice they both butt up to the end, but there's an equal amount in each. Space around, where the amount that's in here between each one is equal, and there whatever's left goes on the ends. And space evenly, where this and this and this and this and this and this are all equal. Flex end, So if we did a flex start here, it would look just like this if you kind of turned it on its side, or I guess did a like a 180 on it. So home and everything, they'd all be starting down here instead of over here. All right. How to align items along the cross axis. So the other one was aligning along the main axis, so going horizontal. This is aligning vertical. All right, so which way are you doing things, for lack of better words? All right. So you'll notice again, stretch, center, flex start, flex end, baseline, and auto. So here are some examples. All right. There, the align items property is set to center. So there's an equal distance between virtually every one. There it's set to stretch. Now, notice what it says here in the description. The align items property determines how flex items are aligned along the cross axis for a container. You can also use align self if you want to take one or more of them and override this. All right, wrapping and unwrapping, we talked a little bit about when I showed you the examples. All right, flex wrap, align content, and flex flow. This, with no wrapping as it says, you can get some of this stuff. It looks pretty poor. All right, and here they've done wrapping. So notice there's enough room for it now, and the other ones go on a new line. All right. So, I mean, otherwise, how could you have fixed this? Well, you could have made the text smaller. You could have said get tix, T-I-X here, and, membership or something like that. Or you could have changed the size of the font. But here you don't have to do that. So as it says here, by default, flex items are not wrapped within a container. By default, they extend from top to bottom. All right. Again, the best way to work with this is to play around with it. And we're going to do some of that. All right. Okay, how to allocate space for flex items. Notice again, flex basis and flex grow. Flex basis allows you to give an initial length for a flex item. Flex grow will typically say you want one of the items in the container to grow at a different rate than the other ones. So they're showing examples here. To set the size of the flex items, as it says, is the same relative to each other. Okay. Set the flex basis properties to relative units of measure like percentages. Now, what they're going to show at the end here, we're almost to the, not to the end of the chapter, but getting close, is they're going to show an example, and it'll be that Samson thing with the dinosaur thing we looked at before. And it'll look very similar to what we saw with the responsive design, but it'll be done with Flexbox. All right. So you can shrink as well as grow. We talked about how you can change the order. Now, order, again, remember, there's a natural order, and that's the order in which you put them in. There's reverse, and then there's order, where you can change them any way you want. This is a very simple example. All right. It says the page at a narrow width with a section in the aside reordered. Okay, so probably what you'd have in there typically is you'd have a sidebar over here, and then your section would be over here. But when you reach a certain point, typically the section will be more important than the sidebar, so you change them around by setting the order. All right, so here's this responsive web page. So I don't know if I still have it up. I brought it up earlier, but I probably don't have it up anymore. So let's bring it up. All right. Bring it up like this. Again, you have all these files, so I'm going to the student download, book examples, chapter 9. It's not the examples I want, it's the book apps. Book apps, chapter 9, and the town hall, and it is the Samson one. This looks very similar to what we did before. So you can see it looks pretty nice. They've included the slick nav. But you can see, what have they done in here? Well, for example, when you look at it, all right, they have centered everything that goes above the menu, and they've stacked it. All right. So to me, it looks like in here someplace they've done a flex direction, all right, with column. All right. Then you've got this. Okay. And you can see what they've done. Again, hopefully it just makes at least some sense to you. So they show you the design of the page, and the good news is there really is, other than the Flexbox stuff in the CSS, there's nothing new in the HTML. All right. When the page is displayed on larger screens like a desktop, Flexbox is used for the navigation bar, the article, and the sidebar. When it's on smaller screens, it's also used for the header. All right. As it says, when the screen gets too narrow to display the article and the sidebar side by side, media queries are used to change the flex direction. All right, from row to column, etc. So here's the HTML, and like I said, there really shouldn't be anything that's in here. Now, it maybe take you a while to look through it, but it's really and truly not that difficult. All right. Now, when we look in here, the UL element, it says, will be implemented as a flexbox that contains the LI elements as flex items. All right. So again, we would have our choice. Do we want to display those in a row format horizontally or in a column format vertically? The main element will be implemented as a flexbox that contains the article and the aside as the flex items. And in the media queries for smaller devices, the aside and articles will be displayed in a column, and the aside will be displayed before the article element. So we're changing the order around. All right, so this is what they're showing you. Again, all the stuff in mustard is what they're changing in here. All right. So as it says, the image in the header is not scalable. Floating and clearing are not used. And the article and the aside, as it says as well, don't have width properties. On smaller screens, again, there's the header that they did the display flex. All right. So they're able to go in here and modify, again, what's in there. And they've changed around the order. So as it says, the article will come after the aside. All right. So how the CSS for smaller screens differs from the example we saw for the responsive design in Chapter 8, again, you can read it yourselves. They're using Flexbox and the properties that it contains. All right, and that's it. So what I plan on doing tomorrow, I want to look at this, but I'm going to show you quickly something that I created a while ago. All right, I didn't know whether I was going to show it to you or not, but I want to work on it too. So we may or may not get to it tomorrow. I don't know. But tomorrow, the plan is this. I'm not right now going over the Halloween exercise. I'm done for now. But tomorrow I'm going to start by going over the Halloween exercise. Then afterwards, we may build something like this. This is just something cheesy that I made. Like, I don't like Doug's pictures, got to be bigger. I wish all these three of these were the same size. We'll work on that. But when you look at this, and it all uses Flexbox, all right, and you can see how well it scales. All right, now the picture doesn't scale because we didn't tell it to, but everything that's in there is pretty decent. All right, and this is not even that different from what you're going to be asked to do for your test. So I want to look at this, and I want to look at your test and make sure I'm not giving you too much, but yet I want to give you enough so you've got an idea what the heck's going on. All right, so tomorrow we'll look some more at Flexbox. All right, we will go through the Halloween exercise. We may or may not go through this ranking exercise I just showed you, but I'd also like to talk to you about grid layout. Again, you will not be tested on grid layout. There will be no homework on grid layout. There will be no labs on grid layout. There'll be no written or hands-on tests on grid layout. But at least you can say you've been exposed to it, which is my goal. All right. So that's what we will do tomorrow. All right. Then on Wednesday, hopefully we may very well create another example. And then probably right now what I'm looking at doing on Thursday is to give you your test on chapters 8 and 9 and giving you Thursday and Friday to work on it class time and then having it due Sunday evening at midnight. Now with that said, please, I realize, I don't know anything about any of you. I know nothing about your personal lives. I get that. But I mean, I've got people that I've got to go to bed. It's like last night, it was 10 o'clock and I still had people emailing me. I cannot do that. All right. So there's a very good chance that come this Sunday, I'm going to bed at 9. So, if you've got questions between 9 and midnight, you're going to have to figure them out yourselves. The other thing too about that is just so everybody knows, because I do go in and take a look at what's out on the Discord server. You're not, you can ask for help in there, but you're not supposed to ask for basically answers for test questions. Hey, I'm trying to do this and this won't work. How do I do it? No, you're supposed to be able to figure that kind of stuff out yourselves. All right, so this was about 42 minutes, as you can see. You can see what we're talking about today. You can see what we're going to talk about tomorrow. All right, and like I said, I wanted to look real quick, but let's see. I don't remember exactly how long, but I don't think you got hosed today from this breaking as it did. All right, so I'll talk to you later. Have a good evening. See you tomorrow.